Welcome to Walchet Talks. This is a bonus episode where we are going to be speaking with Bryan Kennedy, Senior Practice Innovation Manager of Real Estate at Bryan Cave Leighton Paisner. We will explore what sets generative AI apart from the other types of AI, uncover limitations of large language models or LLMs, and see how law firms can harness the power of AI. We will also explore how lawyers can upskill in the modern era of generative AI. We had previously done an episode on generative AI for legal teams with Bryan, and I will be linking that in the description below. So, Bryan, I'm going to dig a little bit deeper. We've heard about AI for years now. This is not the first time. So, why all of the fuss right now? And, how is generative AI different from all of the other artificial intelligence that we've heard about and talked about before?
Yeah. You're absolutely right to point out that AI and machine learning in legal tech isn't new. For years we've used earlier models to do things like classify provisions of documents, answer questions about documents to accelerate due diligence, for example. Machine learning has also been very prevalent in legal research tools as a means of, getting you to the most relevant content. But just to give a bit of context around why there's so much hype around generative AI, probably the key thing to emphasize about this latest generation of large language models is their power and their versatility. They don't represent a simple linear progression of what's gone before. There's really been a step change in capability. And going forwards, we expect to see exponential improvement from here on in. Maybe just to illustrate that principle, although I can't give you actual numbers, think about what would happen if GPT-5 is 10 times more powerful than GPT-4, and the next iteration 10 times more powerful than that, and so on. And that's potentially transformative. Plus, these models are a lot more versatile and flexible. We're talking about general purpose language models that can be applied to a much broader range of tasks. And they have this defining ability to synthesize content, so they can do things like draft documents or summarize documents, which previously AI-based legal tech didn't really do. So, power and versatility are really the key points for me. And maybe one point that I might just add, thinking about it, traditionally developing AI models and, putting these into products, it's always been a very expensive business. And without getting into the weeds, there are some differences in how you train these large language models and how you kind of integrate them that many people believe will have the effect of making them more accessible and more economically viable for organizations to implement. So that's another reason, I guess, that we're seeing generative AI coming to the fore. Very true. I'm going to play a little bit of the devil's advocate over here, and I'm going to ask you, what are the limitations of artificial intelligence? Because not all lawyers are going to be able to use AI for all of their legal processes. So what do you see are the major limitations of this technology? Yeah. So, I do think that the potential for generative AI in the legal industry is huge, but there are material concerns. These include concerns around privacy and security. And I know you've done a great video in the Walchet series on that topic that listeners can check out to know more. Thank you. You've also got... Thank you for that shout out. Oh, no problem. You've also got regulatory and professional considerations, ethical issues and concerns around AI bias, to name but a few. But for me, given we work in a field where accuracy is paramount, probably the most challenging limitation or concern is around quality, accuracy, and the provenance of the information that's been used to pre-train these models. So perhaps it might be worth us focusing on that and diving in a little bit further. I think you've hit the nail on the head, because this brings to the core of what lawyers do and whether they can actually trust an artificial intelligence tool to sort of replace some of that work. Because the first thing, of course, there's a fear of, is AI going to replace lawyers? But I think we've put that to rest in the sense that you still need a lawyer. It's lawyer plus an AI tool, which can work more efficiently than a lawyer without. But I think also understanding how accurate are the results going to be. And if it's anything less than
100% accurate, then does it really make sense? Is, I guess, the question that all lawyers are asking themselves. And it's not something that has one answer for all. It really sort of depends on the use case. So, Bryan, how does a law firm ensure that they are well positioned to harness the opportunities that generative AI provides?
Well, it's always helpful to have an overall strategy, and that generative AI strategy is going to have a number of components. There are maybe half a dozen or so that kind of leap out into my brain. Maybe to start with, I think it's a good thing to have an idea of the general approach you want to take. And we touched on that question of whether you want to focus your efforts on a one-stop shop solution, the likes of a co-counsel or Harvey, or adopt a number of specialist solutions, and then whether you buy or build. And if you're thinking about building a tailored solution and you've got a clear rationale as to why that makes sense, there's a whole spectrum of build options out there in terms of how much you do in-house versus the extent to which you might bring in third parties to deliver something. And you'll need to think about that, taking into account the expertise and resources that are realistically available in your organization. Secondly, whatever route is most appropriate to your firm, and it could be a combination of all of those things, you need to have a plan to identify, explore, and evaluate potential generative AI opportunities. And that really starts with identifying prime use cases, thinking about those instances where generative AI is the right tool for the job, where it's going to deliver those clear practical benefits, and crucially, a sound return on investment. Once you've identified those prime use cases, you want to undertake some well-managed trials and carefully evaluate the results. Another component of the strategy I wanted to emphasize is really thinking carefully about who you want to collaborate with in terms of legal tech vendors. We're at a really early stage of the product development cycle for legal, and what's on the table 12 to 18 months from now, I think, could look quite different. So in a way, I think understanding the vendor AI roadmaps and knowing who you trust to deliver in the medium to long term is just as important as evaluating day one products. And just to round off on strategy, given the limitations and concerns around generative AI we talked about at the start, it's important to have strong governance in place in respect of its use, formulating appropriate policies with input from all of your relevant stakeholders. And then there's also massive pieces around data preparedness. That's a really meaty topic in itself, and also around skills and education.
Yeah, I actually want to dig a little bit deeper into that, because entering the space of generative AI for lawyers is going to require significant amounts of reskilling of the existing lawyers or the workforce that support the lawyers. So what are the key skills that lawyers will need in this new era? Presumably prompt engineering is one of them. But anything else that you would recommend in terms of reskilling or upskilling the legal teams?
At a general level, I think it's important for everyone in a law firm or legal department to have an understanding of the potential applications, limitations, and implications of generative AI. Because over time, this is going to be a transformative technology. So there needs to be a program of awareness raising within firms. And on top of that, training on specific tools, obviously, so lawyers know how to use these effectively and responsibly. I'd agree with you that in the short and medium term, knowing how to craft prompts to get the best results from the large language model is going to be a key skill. But in the long term, I wonder if the position might be a little bit more nuanced. And just to kind of break that down, for those who are developing generative AI solutions, it's going to remain critical. Intrinsically, prompt engineering is how you further train these models to improve their performance in specific contexts.
And I'm just going to interrupt you there for a second, Bryan, to ask, does this skill set require someone who is a qualified lawyer, or can it be someone who is not a lawyer?
Well, I mean, you're kind of going to have to involve both. You definitely need those subject matter experts, the lawyers, to input into that process, because others may not have the context. but also, you will need some specific data science or machine learning talent. And if you're a law firm, I think you'll either need to hire in that, or you'll need to partner with those who have that expertise, unless you purely want to take stuff off the shelf. But that's kind of, if you like, the development phase. But once they've actually been developed and lawyers are using the tools, I kind of think that getting the right outcome being heavily dependent on how exactly you ask the question, that is not a desirable feature. Imagine if as a client you got a very different answer out of your human lawyer, depending on the subtleties of how exactly you worded the same substantive question. I'm guessing you might not be the most popular lawyer. And so I think that over time, developers will look to engineer this type of inconsistency out of products as far as possible, so that you can ask substantively the same question any number of ways and get consistent results. That just seems like a better place to get to.
Yeah.
And maybe just to emphasize, I think it's definitely helpful for lawyers to have an understanding of some of the core concepts around data science and machine learning. But I don't think the lawyers themselves need to kind of attempt to suddenly become data scientists or machine learning engineers. It's maybe a bit like that old question of whether lawyers should learn to code. Where I'd have probably said that having some understanding of how developers work, how the code works, it's great for working with software developers, without suggesting that lawyers should actually learn to code. And I think that kind of general awareness of the disciplines will be especially useful for those in knowledge management roles, where their content and their data is going to be used to fine tune and prompt engineer the model. So at least that's my take on it.
I would tend to agree with that. You would need a multidisciplinary approach to get the best results, because you do need that combination of data science plus law. Because even once you get the results from the prompt, you do need someone who is a lawyer to review that from a sense of accuracy, completeness, etc. But you also need the data science input to tell you how to make it better, or what was the manner of functioning of the model that gave you that response. And if you want a different response, what can we do to get that response? So I think that's I think that's a great response.
Yeah, and definitely kind of developing that deep collaboration will be super important in the generative AI space. So again, I think maybe to a degree, success or failure in individual firms' efforts, may depend on how kind of strongly they get that type of collaboration going. So it'll definitely be an interesting and brave new world.
Sure. This concludes our bonus episode on generative AI for legal teams. Please subscribe to our channel if you found this video helpful, and click on the notification bell icon below so you don't miss out on new videos. Thanks for tuning in. Bye bye.